They call themselves Localists, a movement that wants semi-autonomous Hong Kong to split from China, amid concerns that Beijing is cracking down on freedoms. But as activists become more radicalised, have their calls for independence proven a provocation too far?
It was meant to be a formality.
本人涂謹申，謹對全能上帝宣誓。
謹以至誠據實聲明及確認。
A necessary step before newly elected members of Hong Kong's Legislative Council could take office.
定當擁護中華人民共和國香港特別行政區基本法。
基本法。基本法。基本法。
The compulsory oath includes a pledge to uphold the basic law, Hong Kong's mini-constitution, which states that the region is an inalienable part of China.
希望在於人民，改變始於抗爭。
A few lawmakers used the event as a platform for protest. But no one expected the political crisis that was to come. As the ceremony got underway, two young politicians were upstairs in their offices, planning to do something a little different.
個旗咧就係我哋一陣間會嬲住起身嘅，咁就 Hong Kong is not China 啦。我諗喺本土派嚟講，其中一個好重要嘅信息就係港中區隔啦。咩叫港中區隔？就係要避免嗰種咁樣嘅而家嗰種中國大融合嗰種咁樣嘅論調。
That separatist philosophy was a central theme in their election campaign. Localists, as they are known, believe that Hong Kong's identity and core values are being undermined by an increasingly meddlesome Beijing. They say Hong Kongers, not China, should be masters of their city's destiny. And to achieve that, some localist activists advocate radical action.
以北京政府為首嘅一股勢力，佢可以 override 我哋成個 system。而家好明顯就係我哋俾人搞緊，咁時代嘅回應就係我哋追求獨立。
只要越嚟越多擁有獨立意志嘅人加入我哋，最後就會香港獨立。
Though derided by critics as unrealistic and illogical, support for the cause has been growing. According to a July 2016 poll conducted by the Chinese University of Hong Kong, 1 in 6 Hong Kongers want the city to be independent of the mainland.
呢一個就係一個社會嘅大轉變、大趨勢，而政府係千方百計要打壓、扼殺呢一股理念，就係因為佢知道我哋將會成為社會嘅主人翁。
我哋嘅下一代應該可以決定佢哋嘅政治前途。
The government barred Edward Leong and 5 other localist candidates from running in the Legislative Council elections. The move sparked protests and Hong Kong's first pro-independence rally.
佢完全都唔理你香港人嘅意見，佢淨係一味聽上面講，你而家究竟係為香港人服務啊，定係你為上面大陸服務呢？
It's unclear why Sixtus Leung Chung-hung and Jiao Wai-ching were allowed to run. But victory at the polls meant they had a unique opportunity to challenge the system from within.
梁頌恆議員
But first, they had to take the oath.
I, Sixtus Leung Chung-hung, shall pay earnest efforts in keeping guard over the interests of the Hong Kong nations.
梁頌恆議員，你改變咗誓詞內容，請按照法例定明嘅誓言字句重新宣誓。
When he retook the oath, Leung draped the flag around his shoulders, crossed his fingers, and repeatedly mispronounced one word.
of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China, of the People's Republic of China.
I, Yao Wei-cheng,
Yao turned in a similar performance.
swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the Hong Kong nation.
你咁樣做係冇權力為你監誓嘅。
Asked to retake the oath, she mispronounced 2 words, one of them refashioned as an obscenity.
I, Yao Wei-cheng, being a member of the Legislative Council of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China.
The backlash was ferocious. Pro-Beijing supporters took particular offense at the word China, a derogatory term used in the early 20th century by the invading Japanese to refer to China. They said it was an insult to all Chinese people and insisted the pair be given the boot. The Hong Kong government launched a lawsuit to unseat the duo. And when word came that the central government in Beijing was planning to intervene in the dispute, thousands of protesters took to the streets. Not all were supporters of Leong, Yao, or even the localist movement. The demonstrators were instead united by anger over a perceived erosion of Hong Kong's autonomy and judicial independence. Later that night, street battles erupted as hundreds of demonstrators braved pepper spray and riot police. By early morning, the protesters who remained were no longer just calling for Beijing to back off. So what gave rise to this push for independence? From where did the localist ideology spring? For many of Hong Kong's young localists, the Umbrella Movement, which erupted on September the 28th, 2014, was a turning point.
9/28嗰一日令我非常之印象深刻，就係原來有人為咗呢一個地方，可能係為咗一個政治嘅制度、一個民主嘅選舉，佢哋甘願係會付出自己嘅生命。
今晚通宵留守，好唔好？
For 79 days, protesters occupied some of Hong Kong's biggest streets. They wanted the right to elect the city's top official, the chief executive, in fully democratic elections. This audacious and largely peaceful show of civil disobedience captured the world's attention, but left many of its supporters bitterly disappointed.
我哋都唔覺得係會 fail。香港突然之間可以 occupy 咗咁多主要嘅地方，你會 fail 啊？係啊，你唔會諗到自己會 fail， 但係後尾我哋 fail 咗。
Student leaders who had initiated the Umbrella Movement advocated non-violent civil disobedience. But as the occupation wore on and police used increasingly harsher methods to deal with demonstrators, some protesters started questioning that strategy.
我覺得大家係要有個心理準備，預備一啲合理嘅武力去自保。我強調係武力，唔係暴力。
The Umbrella Movement, initially a celebration of peaceful resistance, was also the catalyst for the emergence of newer, more radical voices, among them Ray Wong.
既然和平理性非暴力嘅方式喺短期做唔到嘅時候，我哋短期內就要用一個比較激進嘅方式，去為呢一個政權帶來威脅。
When the Umbrella Movement ended, Wong founded his own political party known as Hong Kong Indigenous. One of its earliest activities was a campaign with other localist groups against smugglers from mainland China. Hong Kongers had long complained about the large number of day trippers from the neighbouring Chinese city of Shenzhen. Many came solely to source for goods that were either cheaper here or unavailable on the mainland.
佢哋係將我哋嘅日常用品都搶購一空。好多邊境地區本身其實都係一啲民居，但係因為呢啲水貨客佢哋走私，令到嗰個地方嘅租金好貴啦，令到嗰個地方嘅物價非常之高啦。
By tapping in to a long simmering resentment towards mainlanders, the campaign struck a chord. Hundreds of protesters showed up at the demonstrations. Many had participated in the umbrella movement, but now supported some of that movement's more radical fringe groups and offshoots.
好矛盾嘅就係我哋要做到咁激進，先有咁多傳媒會去廣泛報導。如果我哋唔咁激進嘅話呢，啲媒體可能係當一個小新聞咁樣就過咗去，亦都唔會有咁多人去留意呢一件事。
The tactic seemed to work. 2 months after this protest, China abolished the scheme allowing Shenzhen residents unlimited visits to neighbouring Hong Kong. A year later, Hong Kong indigenous made the news again. On the evening of Chinese New Year 2016, the group urged supporters to converge on downtown Kowloon to stop a crackdown against unlicensed street hawkers. Dubbed the Fishball Revolution after a popular snack sold by some of the hawkers, the campaign soon descended into some of the worst violence Hong Kong had seen in decades.
魚蛋革命其實只不過係一個爆發點，係俾香港人去將佢哋對政府啊、對警察嘅不滿一次過宣泄晒出嚟。
Police arrested 10 protesters in connection with the riots. Wong himself was slapped with 3 charges and faces up to 10 years in prison if he is found guilty. But despite widespread condemnation of the riot, support for Hong Kong indigenous grew. The group fielded Edward Leong at a by-election just weeks later. Out on bail after being arrested for his alleged role in the riot, Leong turned in a surprisingly strong performance, winning 15% of the vote. When the government banned Edward Leong from running in the Legislative Council elections, Hong Kong indigenous responded by throwing its weight behind Sixtus Leung Chun-hung and his party. Youngspiration had also emerged in the aftermath of the umbrella movement. But unlike the Hong Kong Indigenous Party, it wasn't founded on a specific ideology. This was perhaps the reason it was allowed to contest the elections.
我哋唔係有一個 ideology， 我哋再揾翻班人，我哋係有一大班人想去做一個 campaign， 因為嗰陣時 Revolution 完咗，我哋覺得我哋唔想就咁就輸咗，咁我哋就開始百幾人咧就喺度諗，究竟我哋有啲咩係共同所相信嘅一啲嘢。
By September 2016, though, Youngspiration's position was clear. A record number of people turned up to cast their ballots on polling day. As vote counting got underway, large crowds gathered to await the results. By early morning, the signs were clear. Hong Kongers wanted change and were happy to back newcomers willing to challenge Beijing and the status quo. Nathan Law became the youngest person ever to win a seat in the Legislative Council. The 23-year-old was the sole candidate of Demosisto, a party he co-founded with activist Joshua Wong. At 19, Wong was too young to run, but had worked hard on Law's campaign.
I think that the Mirror movement was the beginning of us to really think about self-determination, because we see the democratic movement stuck in the agenda provided by the Communist Party and the central government, and we have to think about another option.
The politician with the most support also championed self-determination. Eddie Chu was an independent with no party backing and a shoestring budget. He swept a victory with more than 80,000 votes. Perhaps the biggest surprise of the night was Sixtus Leung Chun-hung and Yao Wai-ching's victories. But even before the news had sunk in, they were already planning to distort their oaths.
我諗第一關我哋要應付嘅可能係宣誓啦，政府會嘗試控告我哋發假誓啦，或者虛假聲明啦。
The fallout that followed their distorted oaths is now known as Oathgate, a saga that would run on for months.
主席，我認為而家會議室裏面係冇足夠嘅法定人數。
An attempt by the Legislative Council President to administer the oath a second time was thwarted after pro-Beijing politicians walked out. They were confronted by several pro-democracy lawmakers. By then, the government had already launched its legal challenge to unseat Yao and Leong. But a request that they be temporarily barred from being sworn in had been denied by the courts.
佢哋鍾意去保護嗰啲侮辱全球華人嘅人，唔需要佢哋道歉。我哋唔可以去睇住佢哋咁樣沒有誠意、沒有道歉嘅宣誓。還想議員嘅宣誓，還想議員要宣誓。
1 week later, Yao and Leong pushed their way into the Legislative Council chamber, surrounded by some members of the pro-democracy camp. The council president had changed his mind about letting the duo retake their oaths and had barred them from attending the meeting.
主席唔係大晒，呢一本議事規則裏邊有講清楚，佢唔可以做乜，佢唔可以做乜。召開會議，依法講題。召開會議，依法講題。
The council president adjourned the meeting soon after. Tensions continued to build in the days that followed. Scuffles erupted when the two politicians attempted to storm another council meeting. Ray Wong from the Hong Kong Indigenous Party came to lend his support. By then, it had become clear that the central government planned to intervene in the crisis. Wong suggested that it had always been his party's plan to force Beijing's hand.
清正兩個同埋今次整個立法會嘅宣誓風波，係成功引發咗中共對喺香港同埋港共政權嘅憲政危機，咁只會令到越嚟越多人支持香港獨立。
On November the 7th, Beijing acted. In an unsolicited interpretation of Hong Kong's basic law, the central government said oaths must be taken sincerely and solemnly. Those who fail to do so would be disqualified from office without being given a chance to retake their oaths. Hong Kong's chief executive pledged to implement the interpretation. He also warned that an anti-subversion bill that sparked massive demonstrations in 2003 was back on the table.
最近喺香港出現嘅呢啲港獨同埋分裂國家嘅主張呢，我相信會令到中央政府認為23條立法呢都唔係淨係一個未完成嘅一個憲制責任嘅問題，而係有咗現實意義。支持釋法。
For pro-Beijing politicians and their supporters, the intervention was welcome news. Hundreds gathered to show their approval.
喂，立法會係為香港人服務嘅喎， 即使我哋香港就係等於中國喎，冇理由話要有啲咁嘅港獨分子喺度，我哋個立法會裏邊搞亂我哋香港。
Days later, the High Court ruled against Yao Wai-ching and Sixtus Leong Chung-hung.
政府用咁多嘅小動作嚟向法庭施壓，法庭受咗咁多嘅壓力，作出一個咁樣嘅判決，係意料之內嘅。釋法係其中一個動作，係施壓嘅一部分，我自己感覺。
Hong Kong's Court of Appeal affirmed that decision and also added that Beijing's interpretation had a retroactive effect.
民主自決，民主自決，保護立法會，保護立法會。
The Hong Kong government then took things further, filing cases to disqualify 4 more legislators, including Nathan Law, even though their oaths had already been accepted.
係絕對不能夠接受。
All had staged protests during the oath-taking ceremony, but none advocated independence for Hong Kong.
This is about the Beijing government manipulating its power in order to erase all those voices that support democracy, that scrutinize the governments, kick them out from the council.
梁議員，請你返回座位。
都話我未完成。
A provocative piece of political theatre meant to advance the cause of Hong Kong independence had instead sparked a major crisis for the city's pro-democracy movement.
I, Sixtus Leong Chung-hang, swear by the Almighty God that
Sixtus Leong Chung-hang never thought he'd be so badly outmaneuvered by Beijing.
of the People Republic of China.
你唔會想像到人哋無啦啦轉遊戲規則去同你玩。其實唔關你話係咪我 pro independent 係咪我 pro self determination 定係你 pro democracy 就會冇事咧 ？I don't think there's any difference to Beijing government if you want to seek for power from their hands.
Yao and Leong were officially ousted in December. They were also told to return some $240,000 in salaries and subsidies. But Leong said money wasn't his biggest worry.
Google、Facebook 話俾我聽，我俾人改咗密碼啦。Google 話俾我聽，我俾政府嘅組織 hack 咗啦。佢冇話俾我聽邊個政府啦，大家自己去估。Telegram 我 set 咗 two-step verification， 但係有一日朝頭早7點幾，我見到個嚟自北京嘅 IP 係 set 咗入去，而我係 even 冇 notification 嘅，我唔知佢點做到啦。聽電話係潛水聲啦。係。
What happened next showed just how dangerous things had become for Leong.
你好啊，立法會秘書處俾信件。
哦，唔該你，唔該你，
唔該你，
麻煩晒。
唔該唔該。
哎呀，睇下呢啲咩先，我寫下先。刀片信，斷啦，咪即係話咧，佢就話佢係一個地下黨，即係咁我話我係反共分子，跟住咧就寄咗張刀片俾我。
The note called Leong an anti-communist and told him he had to die.
呢啲係 expected 嘅幾部曲嚟㗎。係啊，你唔寄嚟我又驚下你真係諗住搞啲乜啦。你寄咗嚟我反而冇咁驚啊。
時代革命，時代革命。
如果我知道個選舉結果係咁輕易被推翻嘅話，我就寧願我唔去個選舉。
當選！
我覺得時間唔喺我哋嗰邊，因為 at some time 佢哋就會 totally destroy the whole system in Hong Kong。到時唔係 Hong Kong is not China，Hong Kong is not Hong Kong anymore。咁我而家好努力咁樣去阻止嗰件事發生緊啦，我唔知我成唔成功。